start day 865 of this Trump administration. It's now 4 a.m. in London, where the president's about to start day 2 of his state visit to the UK. And while today was about ceremony, tomorrow is about politics. A meeting with the outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May and a news conference, which will be interesting now that Trump has injected himself directly into British politics. Tonight's state dinner allowed the president perhaps a distraction from his problems back home. In their remarks at Buckingham Palace tonight, the president and the Queen talked about what's always been called the modern era of the special relationship, this one forged in World War II.
After the shared sacrifices of the Second World War, Britain and the United States worked with other allies to build an assembly of international institutions to ensure that the horrors of conflict would never be repeated. Tonight we celebrate an alliance that has helped to ensure the safety and prosperity of both our peoples for decades, and which I believe will endure for many years to come.
This week we commemorate a mighty endeavor of righteous nations and one of the greatest undertakings in all of history. The bond between our nations was forever sealed in that great crusade. As we honor our shared victory and heritage, we affirm the common values that will unite us long into the future.
By the way, the Queen's message there of global institutions about as pointed as she ever gets. The president is fighting with the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. This weekend, The Guardian published a piece by the mayor in which he said, quote, Donald Trump is just one of the most egregious examples of a growing global threat. That's why it's so un-British to be rolling out the red carpet this week for a formal state visit for a president whose divisive behavior flies in the face of the ideals America was founded upon: equality, liberty, and religious freedom. Today, the president blasted the mayor on social media, and we quote, Sadiq Khan, who by all accounts has done a terrible job as mayor of London, has been foolishly nasty to the visiting president of the United States, by far the most important ally of the United Kingdom. He is a stone-cold loser. Khan reminds me very much of our very dumb and incompetent mayor of NYC, Bill de Blasio, who has also done a terrible job, only half his height. As we mentioned, this trip comes as Trump faces new political battles and minefields back at home. And here's the news on that front. House Democrats are not backing off their investigations or oversight of his administration, even as they wrestle with the growing calls for an impeachment inquiry. The House Judiciary Committee will hold hearings on the Mueller report 1 week from today. The special counsel isn't expected to be there, but John Dean will, former White House counsel under Richard Nixon, famously the star witness for the Watergate hearings. Sources tell NBC News the full House will vote next Tuesday on whether or not to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress for ignoring a subpoena for the full Mueller report. Trump's threat of tariffs on products from China and Mexico, as well as the risk of a wider trade war, has a number of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle worried about the impact on the economy. Those same members of Congress are also facing pressure to come up with a budget and, by the way, to raise the debt ceiling before the recess in July and August. We can see that one coming. There's also the latest controversy created by the president's advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Here's what he told reporter Jonathan Swan of Axios when he was asked about his response to the email summoning him to that now famous June 2016 meeting with the Russians at Trump Tower.
Why didn't you pick up the phone and call the FBI? It was an email that said Russia, that said the Russian government was trying to help. Like, why didn't you do that?
Jonathan, we're in a place now where people are playing Monday morning quarterback and they're being so self-righteous. Let me put you in my shoes at that time, okay? I'm running 3 companies. I'm helping run the campaign. I get an email that says show up at 4 instead of 3 to a meeting that I'd been told about earlier that I didn't know what the hell it was about.
It had Russia in the subject line.
Again, I would get about 250 emails a day. And so I literally saw show up at 4. I showed up at 4.
Would you call the FBI if it happened again?
I don't know. It's hard to do hypotheticals, but the reality is that we were not given anything that was salacious.
Here for our leadoff discussion on a Monday night, Annie Carney, White House reporter for the New York Times, and as of tonight, we're so happy to say, newly minted political contributor and analyst for this network. Two more of our returning veterans, Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post, moderator of Washington Week on PBS, and Tim O'Brien, executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion, who also happens to be the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. Good evening and welcome to you all. Annie, are there any deliverables that are supposed to come home with this president to the United States, or, as we've come to know it, just the usual?
So far, it's just the usual. We'll see tomorrow. He has meetings with May. He's going to have a meeting with Macron, and he's meeting with the Irish Prime Minister, too. So there is more than just pomp and circumstance to this visit. But so far, what we've seen play out is almost the same playbook we saw in the trip he just took to Tokyo, where if you're just watching what he's doing on the ground, and the words that are coming out of his mouth so far, it's all according to what he's supposed to be doing. His speech at the dinner was appropriate. And then there's another track playing at the same time, which is what he's doing on Twitter, which is petty political fights, which is talking about politics at home and politics in the place that he's visiting. And it's like a two-track thing where he appears to be distracted from all of the pageantry that's there for him, and he appears to be a man who can't focus on exactly what's at hand.
Robert Costa, the Queen of England, often seen, rarely heard from, as I said, about as pointed as she ever gets, talking about the global institutions that came about in the wake of World War II, i.e. NATO, that are still proud and functioning to this day. You, I know, have noticed a commonality of the president's foreign travel. What is that, and what could go wrong when he takes questions tomorrow?
We wrote about it in tonight's post for the paper on Tuesday, about how the president often makes controversial remarks before he heads to a foreign country, and then he makes controversial remarks when he's there, but he often doesn't have a political project, an ideological project he's mounting. For example, with this trip to the UK, he has politicians who are sympathetic to the Brexit movement, like Boris Johnson, the former foreign minister, Nigel Farage, the head of the Brexit party. He is not scheduled to meet with them, even though he has made supportive comments, controversial comments, in interviews ahead of this trip. But it'll be interesting to see tomorrow what the president has to say in that press conference with the prime minister, who's outgoing. Does he really lean in to supporting someone like Boris Johnson to be her successor?
Tim, I want to play for you something that transpired with Nicole Wallace this afternoon at 4 p.m. This is Jeremy Bash's assessment of the tableau in London today.
There in Buckingham Palace tonight, you have a study in contrast. You have the Queen of England. She is the one individual who represents history of nobility, of patriotism. She's the one individual who represents tradition and honor, and he represents individual one.
Did Jeremy get it about right there?
I think he got it pretty close. I think the thing to always remember about Donald Trump is he's alternately attracted to pomp and circumstance, but he hates institutions. He's profoundly anti-authoritarian. And I think when Bob said earlier, that he likes to pop balloons before he goes off on foreign visits, he does this routinely. And I think he actually does it without a strategic agenda other than to cause trouble and to draw attention to himself. When you looked at any of those reels today of him at Buckingham Palace, he actually looked like the guy who got off the tour bus accidentally, got in upstairs, got into the party, and then was suddenly bummed out that he had to stick around. And he doesn't like putting on a tuxedo. He doesn't like formal affairs, but he does love drawing the attention of the establishment.
Will he ever show a sense of stewardship? Will he ever represent us on an overseas trip?
Well, I think someone who has a sense of stewardship and leadership and builds strong teams is someone that's typically thinking about someone other than themselves. And Donald Trump is a profound narcissist. Usually the first thing on his mind when he gets into a room is what's in it for me and how can I play this to great effect. He's a very effective messenger because of that, but he tends not to be someone who's either parental or a steward.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.